Hey everybody, I'm Eddie Starr, and this is the College of Rock and Roll Knowledge. Class is now in session. This is where the music and culture that shaped a generation live on, and my own path through the world of rock and roll.
There I am in the magical mystery of Scotland, the magical hills of Scotland, or somewhere lost in Harry Potter movie.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I think you can see where.
Capri. Is that Venice or Capri?
That is Capri.
Capri.
That is correct. So how are you doing?
I'm fine. But,
so what have you been up to since Rockquiem?
Let me just. Sorry. Is there any way to get the volume? I guess I could. Yeah. You recording? Does the volume sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So you go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, what have you been working on since Rockquiem? Or have you been listening to anything? Or
yeah, well, since Rockquiem, my whole vision and direction for that project has changed dramatically. So I'm really very encouraged. I think the whole purpose of me engaging in that after the fact, hindsight is 20/20, they say, what was to get a grip on doing something like that, and writing something, engaging and teaching myself. I wrote this play and used licensed music, compliments of a guy named Eddie Starr. And it came up. It came
a little shameless self-promotion, right?
A little shameless self-promotion, and my friend Paul Castratero, and but that whole journey has taken me to the place where I discovered where my strengths are. Not that, and by taking on too much, I could see where I excelled in more in the process, where I was more grounded. So, yeah, right now I'm focusing on rewriting it and adapting it as a property, hopefully to promote it for television and the screen. So that's a whole nother endeavor and medium and form of writing. But I am going to keep the story pretty much the same. I'm just going to change the character and the backstory. So that's where I am with that. I've come up with some ideas and concepts. Haven't put them down on paper yet. Haven't broke ground with that or broke the ice, as they say. But it's coming.
I was thinking about that. I had a couple of questions for you because, I've known you for a long time and seen you perform in many shows.
Yeah.
And did writing this play, because rock music was not your first, it wasn't really in your forte before. I know that you've listened to a lot of different things and stuff like that, but do you think that by writing this and performing the rock and roll, which was very much an integral part of the show, did that change your sort of
opinion or
habits, because to me, like, everybody has what I call their soundtrack. Maybe today you'd call it a playlist, but people have specific types of music that they listen to. There's some people that can listen to a lot of different genres and they can appreciate that, and that's really cool. For me, I've always been a very I like something, really, really like it, or I don't really like it. And then there's been some things in between, but I've pretty much always been, in the whole rock and roll thing.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you, do you feel like that? Because you did a great job performing the songs.
Yeah. Um, I have to say it was challenging because the how can I say it? Oh, you're gonna have to edit this part. My mind went blank. No, I'd say the
don't do edits.
Oh no, you better. Uh, I would say the majority of my work hadn't been or didn't include the genre of rock and roll. Now, I've been exposed to many different types of music. I have you to thank because you always send me different videos to check out. And then after I hear them, I'm like, wow, I really like that. Um, like, um, like Bad Religion for example. When you sent me that video of you, I was crazy for it. I really liked him. Now I'm a big Green Day fan, so they reminded me of they had a little bit of an early Green Day-esque. I wonder if Green Day actually was influenced by them, but I like the type of music where you can actually understand the words, and then it really grips you. I don't like music so much, even if it's rock and roll or anything, where I can't hear the music. Not so much hear the music, but I can't hear the lyrics. It's so important for me to understand the words, whatever it is, because otherwise I feel lost. I feel like I'm on the outside of what the person's doing. So anyway, to get back to your question, yeah, it was a big challenge, especially to imagine myself having to do those songs. Now, I spent a lot of time with them because I integrated them into the play I was writing, and it was by chance and great luck that they fit in like a puzzle piece, as you know. Um, your opinion and compliment of me having done a good job means a lot because I don't have something to compare it to. It was my first kind of stab at it. I just think I did okay. Of course, every artist is always going to say, "Oh, I could have done this better," blah blah blah. But thank you, I appreciate that. But I like rock and roll. I like a lot of music, and you have definitely helped to expose me to music that I probably wouldn't have ventured into listening to or even thought about. And I ended up liking it.
To be fair, most people in America haven't really experienced a lot of the music that I talk about because one of the things I've spoken about in other podcasts has been for instance, the whole British glitter thing of the early 1970s and the Sweet, and even Bowie, who was a part of that, right. T-Rex, Mark Bolan. That music wasn't played in America, and if it hadn't have been for the connect the dots sort of type thing, where back in the day in the 80s, when I was reading Cream magazine and reading an article with Joan Jett or somebody, and she would talk about Rodney's English Disco, and then I could listen to Rodney on Sunday night and he would play the song. So basically all the music that I've sort of that's been in my circle has been stuff that I had to go out and find. It was not something that was, okay, here it is, and it's on the radio all the time or something like that. But what I'm interested in hearing from you, though, is I'm interested in hearing about what you were listening to as a kid.
Yeah.
And going, do you have a memory of what you were listening to when you were say, when did music first, music on the radio first sort of come into your world type thing?
Okay. Well, I just want to first preface it by saying, in your last podcast, you said something that really grabbed a hold of me, and it made sense, and it sort of set off my thinking about how music found me and how I found it as a source, a resource to connect with. You said something that it's not so much the albums, but the songs. And that, to me, what you were talking about, individual songs that you would hear, and then you would as go out and dig through and find the albums and then expose yourself more. I didn't so much do that. It was individual songs that grabbed me. And so that's what I remember. The first introduction to music, if you want to know, of course, is what my mother would play. She had a pretty good collection of albums, and most of her albums were, I guess, from her generation. You had Andy Williams, Frank Sinatra, Barbra Streisand, that type of music. And she didn't play music often, so on the radio then I would hear, God, if I heard that song, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head once more, I swear. But it's like they overplay a song, but anyway, I would listen to the radio either in the car, because often I was like shotgunning it, driving somewhere with somebody. And then I slowly just started taking out my mother's albums. We had a hi-fi type of cocktail table that had a record player, and it was pretty cool. And I would listen to records and just lay there and listen. Believe it or not, one of my first loves were the Carpenters. I know that's not a group that you gravitated toward or like, but I really admired Karen Carpenter's voice, and also just the because I singing has always been a big part of my life. So, and then of course I would hear songs when I was out in the movie theater or in the mall or something, and I would hear a song like I'd hear a Beatles song, and of course. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but I think with me, it wasn't so much I went out and sought the music out like you did. You were kind of a pioneer or a hunter, I more like the friends I was around introduced me to music. They'd simply just be playing it, especially the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, and then just I probably have heard some of the songs before, but it didn't occur to me to go out and buy them. I did have a 45 collection for a while, but so that's how pretty much I got influenced, was mostly by what I heard on radio or the group of friends I was hanging out with, what they played. So I jumped ahead a bit because that really is the means of how music influenced me. I didn't have that drive to go out and seek it so much as it sought me out through, or I found it out through what other people introduced me to, unknowingly, and that's how my tastes and exposure to music happened.
Wow. Well, to be fair, I mean, the Carpenters were huge in Southern California because I think I grew up in, well, it's Artesia, California, but over a couple of towns over, the Carpenters were from Downey, California.
Oh.
So they were really, a pretty big deal. I would say. Sometimes it's hard too because I think, have to look at the place and sort of the time of where you're at. Like a lot of the music, for instance, that I sort of gravitated to was not what was happening.
Yeah.
In the early 80s, it was all heavy metal. It was all Motley Crue, the Sunset Strip, Bon Jovi. Even though I would say Bon Jovi was sort of, he wasn't that, or the band Bon Jovi, he wasn't put in the group was not sort of labeled in sort of as much with like that Sunset Strip, like Poison and stuff like that. I don't even think Van Halen really was thrown into that whole category, but it was a lot of heavy metal. And so basically a lot of the stuff that I had really sort of scene, like during the 70s in elementary school, was already over. So by the time I really got to my formative years, I was sort of interested in things that were already considered like over. I mean, but I think it's interesting because, like, for me, my mom always told me that the first artist or song was Paul Simon. That was art or a song that I responded to. And so a lot of the stuff I can't really remember. Like, I've always loved Simon and Garfunkel, but I think it's sort of interesting when you go back to those to connect those dots, and how your disposition, or maybe stuff that's going on in your life, or even your friends. I mean, at that specific time, it's not like it is today, where music is almost like, and I'm not trying to say this negatively. I mean, the great thing today is you can go on YouTube and Spotify, and everything is there for you.
I have to say most of the artists though sound the same.
Yeah, but I mean, at the same point, I mean, music was the dominant. I mean, at least from my perspective, music was the dominant pastime for teenagers. And so, do you have like bands like during this, like a specific, stuff that you were listening to, for instance, like in high school or junior high? Do you remember?
It's funny. I was kind of cloistered. I tended to be. I didn't keep a large group of friends, but when I got into high school and into some extracurricular activities, called marijuana, I was trying to get in with the cool crowd, and I certainly did. That's all you had to do is be seen, smoking a joint or whatever with somebody, and then, it was almost through like, you got sucked in, and of course then you'd sit there, somebody would say, hey, we're throwing this party in this like deserted storehouse on this street, you got to crawl through the hole in the door to get in and stuff. And so like those things were rare, but I would be like, oh my God, that sounds so dangerous, and then I'd go in there and they'd be playing like they'd be like blasting Boston, the band Boston, or what was it? I guess it was I don't know, Def Leppard, I'm thinking of, and anything that was pretty hard rock, like what was this? What's the name of the band? Oh my God, Stairway to Heaven. Is it Led Zeppelin?
Oh, Led Zeppelin.
Isn't that them?
Huh?
Isn't that them? Hey,
yes.
Mama, say the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you go.
Oh yeah, no, that was
there you go.
huge. I mean, even.
Well, who was that?
I was in your high school. Huh?
What band was that?
That was Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, I only did that only because I got introduced to stuff because I threw myself into situations that weren't music related, but the music kind of just, attached itself to me like barnacles, and suddenly I knew about it,
Well, I mean, you look at Fast Times at Ridgemont High was Sean Penn's first thing, and I mean, the Stoners, I mean, that was like in Southern California, that was a sort of a huge thing, and they were into, I mean, most of the people I knew who were like stoner people, or they called them that, were into, Led Zeppelin. They were into Ozzy Osbourne. I had a couple of friends who were really hardcore Ozzy fans, and they had the jeans and the flannel shirts and stuff like that.
The band T-shirts are really big in school that people would wear, and then like denim jackets over it.
It's like that was so important.
It's like you had been to the concert, and they were like,
that was like the concert T-shirt was really like your sort of like your social cred. I mean, in Southern California, they had one of the first festivals called the US Festival, which I don't hear anything, about today or in terms of history and that. But the US Festival was huge, and everybody would come, and it would have the US, that weekend or whatever that it was happening. If you came back with whatever T-shirt was on, it was, that was exceedingly important. So,
yeah, definitely, because it made you so current. Like you were definitely mainstream, or you were keeping up with what's current. So absolutely. It was worn as a badge, that's for sure. Or, I mean, I don't know if people consciously did it. Some maybe not. Some maybe did. But it sort of definitely showed that, that who they liked and, where they went. It would be a topic of conversation, Now, just to be clear, I didn't get into marijuana smoking till I was about end of 10th, 11th grade. Before that, I was pretty much kept to myself. But I was trying to fit in, with the cool kids, and I did. But that was the liaison. I wasn't really their friends. It was the common denominator was the fact that, I was now a pot smoker. But that did engage me and introduce me to a lot of music that I probably wouldn't have listened to the complete song if I hadn't been at the party,
Yeah. That's funny. Well, I mean, like I said, everybody, like even in our group that, we used to have our place where we hung out, and a couple of my friends were really into that scene or whatever. And yeah, I mean, that was the thing to do. It was like, at least for us and for what I was doing at the time in terms of my whole thing, it was like, school is a drag. We're going to sit there and make fun of the people who are going into pep rallies and shit like that. But no, it was really we were really, but I mean, it really was the subculture for the outsider. I mean, if you were like top 40 people, like I remember even as far back as elementary school, there was like one side of the playground that was over here, and we used to be able to take record players out, and that was all. This was like 1976, so I was in third grade, and it was all Sean Cassidy, it was Andy Gibb, and all that stuff.
Oh yeah,
and Tiger Beat, and all these, and it would be all these girls who would get Tiger Beat, who they were gone on these like pinup guys, and then on this other little side, someone else would bring out a record player from their class, and they were playing Blondie. I have distinct memories of them playing like Hearts of Glass, and of course, I Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick, and and then of course later on, there was Rock and Roll High School by the Ramones, but even then, and then The Wall came out by Pink Floyd, and that was like huge.
Yeah, well, that one song that they did, I know of. But what's weird is I liked that song, but there was something about it, I think, that was, for me at the time, I felt like, whoa, I can't get that rebellious. I'm not kidding, because I just felt like I was, believe it or not. I mean, and it was just that song was really about just like breaking down the wall and saying, the big fuck you, I guess, to the whole system, and I wasn't quite ready to do that yet. So that song, I found very
that was like that was sort of like the well, at least in school. I mean, a lot of kids were into that record.
Oh yeah.
Another Brick in the Wall, and then I'm trying to think of who else came out.
You can edit that part out. That sounded kind of silly. I found it too challenging. I wasn't ready to rebel against society.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it wasn't really. I mean, but that's the whole point. To me, it's like rock and roll was being rebellious. It
Yeah.
was about like going against the status quo. I mean, I remember them talking about, when they had all these like crazy ideas about like artists putting backward messages on records and stuff like that. And I remember I really got into when the new wave started happening, and I wouldn't have admitted this then, but I really loved like Men at Work.
Oh yeah.
I loved Men at Work. I loved Adamant, of course, and Big Country. I love that band.
I don't know that.
And they had this chain of stores. I don't know if they had them in New York, but they were called Licorice Pizza. And I went in, and of course I was young. I went in with my mom, and that whole thing was going on. And she asked the guy, "Oh well, can I hear the record before we buy it or something like that?" And I was so embarrassed. I just said, let's go. I just don't want to, like, I don't want to be seen with you in here.
What was she asking to be played?
Yeah. So
what was your mom asking them to play?
Men at Work.
Your mother?
Yeah, my mom. She wanted to know if there was anything bad on, because there's all this press. And I mean, it's hard to talk about now because nobody even really remembers that, or, they talk about antidotes, but, just little things. If, you see a thing regarding Tipper Gore or, the PMRC and all that crazy stuff. But it was really, really funny. And, oh yeah, the other band, Judas Priest, that was like huge. They were so huge. Screaming for Vengeance, that album, and then Quiet Riot and Twisted Sister.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I didn't really follow those bands, but Twisted Sister was talked about because they were from Long Island. And they played all over. And of course, everyone was talking about them. And it was just, wherever I was as a kid, I just didn't kind of venture into that part of the music forest. But my music tastes and interests were really shaped in a very, I would say, collective, or what is the word? Eclectic. It became very eclectic. And to this day, it still is. Like there's a classical jazz for flute. There's there's an album called Suite for Flute and Jazz Piano, and it's Jean-Pierre Rampal and Claude Bolling, both very, very established musicians. One's a pianist and one is a flautist, and they're known for classical, but they were venturing into the jazz scene. And the whole album was about, they'd start off playing classically and they would merge and transition into playing jazz. And it was really cool to listen to. And of course, I was introduced to that by a friend who, I suppose, his mother introduced him, So I think I think that might be true to some people. Everybody gets introduced to something and either likes it or doesn't, like you were saying earlier.
Right. Well, I think a lot of it, though, too, is the separation from, like, for me, the thing that it was the music. It was definitely, of course, the music. But at a certain point, it was also things I was reading in, like, Circus Magazine and Cream Magazine.
Yeah.
And, and of course, too, I grew up in Southern California. So that sort of gives you a different point of view because you have access to all these things, like you probably did here in New York, with New York City being so close to, island.
The city till I got older, but there was a lot of, but I could see how California, since the weather is very different than New York, and if you probably, a lot of bands were from California.
Well, I mean, but the whole thing is Hollywood was there. So, my whole point was, okay, I'm reading about this stuff in Cream Magazine, and, now I can go up to the club. I can go to the whiskey. I can go to, whatever, thing was how, or I used to go to Fender's Ballroom in Long Beach, or Madame Wong's, which was a huge place. But at the same time, too, it was sort of weird because a lot of like punk people or people who were into that whole thing, they weren't like hanging out with heavy metal people, you know what I mean? Or it was weird because you couldn't say like, and it's funny because I heard Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols, he was talking about, I really loved Journey back then, but I couldn't say it that I like Journey, or I say that I like Boston or something like that.
God
and
forbid,
that's
right? Yeah.
Not like, if you were like in punk and this, Ramones and all that stuff, you couldn't turn around and say, oh, I love Quiet Riot. So it was very much these like cliques by genre where you really did have a litmus test of, oh, you can only like this.
Social pressure to try.
If you don't like this, you're going to be expelled from our group.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think we all experienced that as a younger person, and at one point, we said, fuck you, and then we went on. I like what I like, and that's part of the I suppose the stepping stone into young adulthood, when you can say, I don't care what you think, and that opens up a whole.
No, I know that, but I mean that was part of, I think, the whole. At that time, though, that was part of the attractiveness of, like, for me, it was about, there's this really cool world where, people are dressing up and getting to do, like, and be rock and roll and be like these very charismatic people that.
Oh, so you wanted to sort of get to know all of them. You want to
not
get
all.
many?
I just meant like in sort of, when, like, for instance, we had the local record store, Best Records in Cerritos, and it was across from the mall, and it was a little store, and I used to go in there and I used to look for records and stuff like that. And there was a couple other record stores that were near us where I used to go and just hunt for specific records and stuff like that. So I guess it's just sort of that there was like an idea behind stuff. It wasn't like okay, I'm listening to this group, and that's probably it's probably, I'm not saying one thing is worse than the other, but I also do think that the whole idea of rock and roll and what it meant, and like going back to Elvis and the ideas that were perpetuated, that when you take away all of that stuff, then what you have you have what you have today. You have, it's rock music, so that is sort of, I guess, my that's just my whole thing, and I mean, everybody has their thing, and it has nothing to do with the music, or it certainly has nothing to do with how someone else feels. But I think that all these things are interesting, and I think that there's a lot of how can I say it? There's a lot that goes into music in terms of, it's not just music, but it's also the time and the place, just like why do some albums get, fly, and then you see some albums that, they don't do anything, but then years and years later, all of a sudden this album becomes the hot thing. And that's because
that's interesting.
Some going on that sort of just, and maybe it's a movie that brings it to people's attention, or even now you could even say a commercial, but I do think that that's the point. But that's
a really good point.
Outside of Boston and all this stuff, so when you got, when you got into musical theater, did that sort of change your and acting? I guess that sort of pulled you into show tunes, for instance.
I like show tunes, but it's interesting. I gravitated. There's a whole different. There are categories in musical theater too. I didn't tend to be attracted to the quote unquote typical American musical. Like Oklahoma and Carousel. I found them kind of boring, if you want to know the truth. No, and looking back, there's some beautiful music in those shows, and there were very interesting stories that encapsulated the American experience. But I tended to like things more like, let's see, Sweeney Todd, Les Miserables, Evita, something that had, if you want to call it like a dark edge, something that had intensity to it. Now, I'm not saying Carousel and Oklahoma and those musicals don't, but there wasn't a certain dark drive in them there was, but I don't know. I tended to like some of the grittier, scarier kind of musicals, if you want to know the truth. Sort of like edgy, like Little Shop of Horrors, let's say, So anyway, yes, that certainly drew me more into listening. But again, with that, I never lost my interest and like for, bands that have meaning to me. Since childhood, I have memories, and there are music, there are songs, especially the Beatles, I would say, that, interesting enough, when I heard them, they didn't necessarily mark that experience that I was having, whoever I was hanging out with. I got lost in those songs, and they became part of who I was, and they really invited me to experience myself. So I was able to enjoy them later on in life, without feeling like I was being drawn back into the past and remembering, oh God, we were running, riding around drunk off our asses or something, going to Burger King, So anyway, yeah.
What about, because you come from a big family, so you must have heard a lot of different types of things that your brothers and sisters were listening to.
Yes,
did that have any effect on you, or did you guys
No, my sister April introduced me to a lot of, I would say, progressive jazz. Like, she was into Angela Bofield and George Benson. She introduced me to, and let's see. There were so many. Hiroshima, actually, she introduced me to. Weren't they kind of jazz influenced, Hiroshima, a little bit?
Yeah, Hiroshima is a jazz band.
Yeah, so she had a like for that, having been introduced to that. So she started bringing a lot of that, or adding albums to my mother's collection. So I would put those on and think, oh, these are great. And of course, I heard of George Benson before, his famous song on Broadway, But anyway, that's pretty much my story. And of course, now I have you. You send me also the new type of music, and I either like it or I don't. But a lot of times, more so than not, I end up thinking, oh, that was really good. I liked what he was saying. I liked his performance, like Iggy Pop even. I can't say that he's somebody that I would run out or intentionally play, but I really, really appreciate watching his effort on stage. And then you tell me his backstory, and I'm just like, my jaw dropped thinking what this man has been through, and he's recovered and he's still out there doing what he's doing. I mean, that really, really warrants some attention and admiration, I must say, So
a lot of people, I guess the whole thing is that people like Iggy Pop, especially Iggy, because he's the one that has persevered and played the long game, which is the hardest thing I think that anybody can do in the music industry. And a lot of the stuff, I guess for me, sharing music, like, in school, a lot of the stuff that I found, I didn't find on my own. It was either reading a magazine or like my best friend Dave in high school, who turned me on to a lot of music. He really did know what was going on. So bands like Generation X, Billy Idol's old band, I found Dave is the one who showed me about Generation X, or, you know, his brother Andy worked at Best Records. And so we would go over there, and there was also another guy, Larry, who ran the place. And I could ask them any questions, and they knew, you know, they were also into Hanoi Rocks, which was sort of big at the time. They were big.
Hanoi Rocks?
Yeah, Hanoi Rocks. Yeah, and they sort of had a sad situation. I think it was their drummer might have been that. I could be all wrong. One of the band members of Hanoi Rocks, I think, was in a car with a member of Motley Crue, and they got into an accident and died. And I think so that sort of like, you know, that ended that. But yeah, he was into that. And you know, or like people, I would go to school and people would talk about it, you know, the different bands, and they'd say, oh, hey, if you like this, then you should check out this. This is really cool. Right. Or like even with Bowie, I never really cared for like the whole Let's Dance and
his later stuff.
I didn't really care for that. I mean, that was great, and I know that was his time, and I'm not taking away from that. But to me, you know, Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin, saying all that stuff that he did way back was the stuff that caught my attention. Or the, you know, it's just like with Iggy. I mean, a lot of my favorite stuff with him is, you know, his work with the Stooges, which was groundbreaking, and a lot, you know, the stuff he did with Bowie, obviously, in Germany in the late 70s. So, like I said, it's just really about what other people have given to me. And I think that that's really what sort of music is about. And that's what music scene used to really be about, especially pre-internet, where you had a lot of, I mean, now it's great because you can share a link really quick. You know, you don't have to make a cassette or do stuff like that. But it's really interesting how
everybody has their own journey, how music entered their life, and how
that's why that soundtracks.
Yeah, you know, your soundtrack. Yeah, I like that. Well, that's pretty much it, Ed. I really thank you for having me on and letting me talk about this, because it's helping me realize how eclectic my experience has been thus far musically, you know, and I suppose it'll keep growing and changing, and that's I look forward to that, you know.
Well, I mean, I think it's really interesting to hear about. I mean, people, you know, they always used to say that you can tell what type of person you're dealing with by if you go into their house and you look at the books that are on their shelf. And I think a lot of times you can tell where a person is coming from sometimes by, you know, by what they listen to and type of music they gravitate to. I mean, for me, I guess, like I said, that is really the interesting thing. And music has been such an enormous part of my life. And I really have, you know, even outside, and like for me recently, I've been listening to classical music and a lot of other different forms of, you know, different genres. But you know, it is really cool. And I think that especially with, you know, rock and roll and specifically, it's just, I guess it's sort of like being not just the eternal teenager, because I don't want to say no one wants to be the eternal teenager, I think, but it's sort of about keeping that vibe of what's exciting, what's going to happen, you know what I mean? Like New Release Tuesday, where everybody had to go to the record store, and you have to get this record and get there, and oh my God, do they have look at the promo stuff that they have, and you know, that type of excitement.
To keep that alive. I think
that's what I think is important. And I think it's also, I think these stories are important because they give sort of perspective to the importance of music the value of music. Like I said, it's great that you can go on Spotify now, or you can go to Apple Music and there's billions of songs and all this stuff and albums. But I think that in order for people to appreciate that, they have to understand the value. And that's why I think all these stories, and by talking about it and I think it gets people excited and also interested to maybe to go to check out an album that they haven't before. So what I want to ask, I have one more question I want to ask you. And so do you think you could name 10, maybe a few of your favorite rock and roll songs that from over your life?
Okay. Well, they kind of vary, that's for sure. I'll start from the very beginning, and they may not be some of them rock and roll songs, but
that's okay.
Yeah. Well, the song "Superstar" by the Carpenters was a favorite of mine. Then I very much liked Elton John. I loved "Candle in the Wind." When my brother Brian listened to that, and I loved "Candle in the Wind" and "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road," and let's see, yeah, Elton John actually was a big favorite of mine. I loved Barry Manilow. I didn't like all of his songs or gravitate to all of them, but "Weekend in New England" is a beautiful song. I liked that. Of course, then I got into the Beatles, and I loved some of their less maybe popular songs, like "Blackbird." I loved "Here Comes the Sun." I loved "Let It Be," of course. Eleanor Rigby was a big favorite. Honestly, some of the harder rock bands I wouldn't say are in my favorite category. They were just bands that I was introduced to out of chance. And let's see. I loved Blondie too. I really did. I guess I didn't listen to her as frequently. I loved a band called Bread. There was band called Bread. A couple of their songs I would listen to. I did tend to favor sadder songs or songs that had a little bit of melancholy about them, but not all of them. Yearning. I think songs that had a yearning, a feeling of yearning in there. Let's see. Yeah, that was, I can't, off the top of my head. Of course, when I got older and moved to the city, man, I worked at a restaurant that used to project rock and roll videos on the walls. It was like one of the biggest first huge restaurants here. When when the restaurants started getting huge, like gymnasiums, and there were like 40 figures running around. But this place was like bare walls, and this is when the MTV just started. So of course I got introduced to Billy Idol, White Wedding, and we were serving lunch while that was playing on the walls. I'll tell you that. So I mean, I liked Billy Idol, but I can't say he's on my favorite list. I liked a lot of disco. I liked Donna Summer. I liked a lot of her songs. It really varies. My goodness. But you asked specifically rock and roll.
Well, what we'll do, because this is the College of Rock and Roll Knowledge.
Yes, it is.
But it's about music, so as well. So what we'll do, and this is since also Philip is the first guest. I have to mention that.
Yeah.
Full disclosure as well, we've been personal friends for many years.
Well,
so what we'll do is off air, we'll as part of the assignment, we'll put together 20 songs which people can go down in the description box below this podcast And you can check out some of Philip's favorites.
Oh, here you go. Stairway to Heaven, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, of course. But that's what we're going to put together a playlist for you for this episode, and you can check that out. And
I have to add Diamonds and Rust, because Paul used to.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, Joan Baez, because my friend Paul used to play the guitar, and he'd have me sing that. And so we even sang that in a few hotel lobbies as sort of like as their entertainment in their lobby. That was fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I there's that great Judas Priest version that they did the acoustic version. Remember I sent that to you.
You did, and I liked it. Yeah, it was darker, but it was really good.
Yeah.
Beautiful song. That's a great song. It really is.
Well,
have it.
Pardon?
So there you have it.
Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you. We want to thank all of our listeners. And please subscribe, click the bell for notifications, and I think I subscribe and
hit the like button.
We'll see you next time, right? But thanks so much for being the first guest.
Oh, thank you, Eddie Starr.
All right. And that's a wrap. Hold on one sec, though. Still, what you want to be. The darkness will turn to light. I'm your dirty secret tonight. Dream or not and take a look inside.
Eddie Starr's College of Rock and Roll Knowledge is a production of Ton Up Incorporated. Copyright 2020 Ton Up Incorporated.